Hare Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We are continuing with Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter number 4. We'll do verses 10 through 14 today. Verse number 10. Vitaraga bhaya krodha manmaya mamupashritaha bhavo jnana tapasa puta madbhavam agataha. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Being freed from attachment, fear and anger, being fully absorbed in me, and taking refuge in me, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus they all attained transcendental love for me. Purport. As described above, it is very difficult for a person who is too materially affected to understand the personal nature of the supreme absolute truth. Generally, people who are attached to the bodily conception of life are so absorbed in materialism that it is almost impossible for them to understand how the supreme can be a person. Such materialists cannot even imagine that there is a transcendental body which is imperishable, full of knowledge, and eternally blissful. In the materialistic concept, the body is perishable, full of ignorance, and completely miserable. Therefore, people in general keep the same bodily idea in mind when they are informed of the personal form of the Lord. For such materialistic men, the form of the gigantic material manifestation is supreme. Consequently, they consider the Supreme to be impersonal. And because they are too materially absorbed, the conception of retaining the personality after liberation from matter frightens them. When they are informed that spiritual life is also individual and personal, they become afraid of becoming persons again. And so they naturally prefer a kind of merging into the impersonal void. Generally, they compare the living entities to the bubbles of the ocean, which merge into the ocean. That is the highest perfection of spiritual existence attainable without individual personality. This is a kind of fearful stage of life, devoid of perfect knowledge of spiritual existence. Furthermore, there are many persons who cannot understand spiritual existence at all, being embarrassed by so many theories and by contradictions of various types of philosophical speculation. They become disgusted or angry and foolishly conclude that there is no supreme cause and that everything is ultimately void. Such people are in a diseased condition of life. Some people are too materially attached and therefore do not give attention to spiritual life. Some of them want to merge into the supreme spiritual cause, and some of them disbelieve in everything, being angry at all sorts of spiritual speculation out of hopelessness. This last class of men take to the shelter of some kind of intoxication, and their affective hallucinations are sometimes accepted as spiritual vision. One has to get rid of all three stages of material consciousness: attachment to material life, fear of a spiritual personal identity, and the conception of void that arises from frustration in life. To get free from these three stages of the material concept of life, one has to take complete shelter of the Lord, guided by a bona fide spiritual master, and follow the disciplines and regulative principles of devotional life. The last stage of the devotional life is called bhava, or transcendental love of Godhead. According to Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the science of devotional service. Adav Shraddha Tatha Sadhu Sango Astha Bhajana Kriya Tato Anartha Nivriti Syat Tato Nishtha Ruchis Tataha Atha Shaktis Tato Bhavas Tataha Premabhyudhanchati Sadhakanam Ayam Premanaha Pradubhave Bhavet Kramaha. In the beginning, one must have a preliminary desire for self realization. This will bring one to the stage of trying to associate with persons who are spiritually elevated. In the next stage, one becomes initiated by an elevated spiritual master, and under his instruction, the neophyte devotee begins the process of devotional service. By execution of devotional service under the guidance of the spiritual master, one becomes free from all material attachment, attains steadiness in self realization, and acquires a taste for hearing about the absolute personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. This taste leads one further forward to attachment for Krishna consciousness, which is matured in bhava, or the preliminary stage of transcendental love of God. Real love for God is called prema, the highest perfectional stage of life. In the prema stage, there is constant engagement in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. So, by the slow process of devotional service, under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, one can attain the highest stage, being freed from all material attachment, from the fearfulness of one's individual spiritual personality, and from the frustrations that result in void philosophy. Then one can ultimately attain to the abode of the Supreme Lord. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So you see, a very, very powerful verse indeed. In this verse, Krishna explains the process of attaining love for him, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that if one is too materially attached, then it's not possible to understand Krishna or even the nature of the Supreme Lord. If one is on the bodily concept, which means thinking, I am this body, does not understand the difference between body and soul, then it is impossible for that person to really understand Krishna or even the Bhagavad Gita. If you remember, in the very beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, especially in chapter 2, Krishna explained the foundation of the Bhagavad Gita. He gave the first knowledge to Arjuna was, you are not this body. So it's important to come out of the bodily concept of life, not stop thinking about the body, but not identify with the body. Instead, identify with the spirit soul that we really are. You see, if one is ignorant of one's identity, then one is considered to be in a diseased condition. You see, when we have a disease, what do? We go to the doctor because we want to cure ourselves of the disease. So, with that medication, that helps us to cure. Similarly, when we are on the bodily concept of life, we are in a diseased condition, and so we need to get cured. Now, who will be our doctor? It's going to be our spiritual doctor, which is our spiritual master, a bona fide spiritual master. And he is the one who can give us instructions, give us guidance, train us how to remove this disease of false identification. Why is it called false? Because we are not this body. We are the spirit soul that keeps moving from one body to another. Now, the spiritual master helps the disciple to progress spiritually. Adau Shraddha Tatha Sadhu Sangha. We read in the purport, right? The famous verse, Adau Shraddha Tatha Sadhu Sangha. So once when someone has basic faith, Shraddha is faith. When one has basic faith that there is God, then one starts to take on knowledge to understand who is God. You see, there's a lot of misconception between God and demigods. People don't know the difference mostly. Why? Because lack of knowledge. So, Adashraddha Tatha Sadhu Sangha. So, when one has that basic faith, then one starts associating with spiritually minded people. Sadhu Sangha. Sadhu means saintly people, those who are interested in self realization. Then comes bhajana kriya. Then the person starts following the process of bhakti yoga, bhajana kriya. And that will lead to anartha nivriti. Anartha means unwanted things which are there in our heart. For example, lust, anger, greed, pride, envy, illusion, all these are there in the heart, maybe in small degree, big degree, it doesn't matter, but mostly it is there in the heart. So when one starts practicing the process of bhakti yoga, then all these unwanted things, they come out of the heart. You see, gradually then one becomes, more determined, more firm, excuse me, more firm in bhakti yoga, starts progressing and reaches a stage of bhava, that feeling for love of God. And then final stage is prema, which is love for the Supreme Lord. So it all starts with basic faith. Excuse me. So that basic faith can be magnified, can be increased, it can be made more firm by associating with not only devotees, but also a bona fide spiritual master. And the first thing that we do is hear. That's what we do every Sunday in the mornings, right? We hear the Bhagavad Gita. Once we hear, then we should go to the next step, which is chanting. Hearing, then chanting. And that's why we do mantra meditation on a daily basis, because that helps us to cleanse our heart of all the unwanted things. But the process is given to us from Krishna through the bona fide spiritual master. Now, the very next verse is a famous verse again. Ye yatha mam prabhadyante tamstatheva bhajamyaham mama vartamanu vartate manushya partha sarvashaha. Sarva means all. Krishna says, as one surrenders unto me, I reward them accordingly. And that's a very fair deal, right? As much as money I'm going to put in my business, that much return I'm hoping to get, or maybe more, right? So here Krishna says, if one surrenders unto me, I reward them accordingly. And he says, everyone has to follow my path. Either we do it now, or we do it after 1 year, 10 years, 20 years in this life, or maybe next life. But Manushya Partha Sarvashaha. Krishna says Sarva, everyone has to follow this path. Now we need to make a choice. Do I want to do it now, or maybe later on? Maybe later on I may not get an opportunity to hear the Bhagavad Gita, right? So it's important to understand how to surrender to Him. How do we worship the Lord? How do we perform Bhakti Yoga? Now, there are 3 stages, as Prabhupada talked about in the purport. There are 3 stages of self realization. One is the Brahman realization, which is understanding the Lord to be an effulgence, bright effulgence, Brahma Jyoti, right? Thinking of Him as the Brahman, the effulgence. The next step is Paramatma realization, which is understanding the Lord as the super soul within the heart. But the highest level is Bhagavan realization, which means understanding Krishna is a personality. He is the supreme personality of Godhead. He is a person. Based on our desires, which level do we want to understand Him as? That is what He is going to fulfill our desire. So He says, Ye yatha mam prapa. As one surrenders unto me, I reward them accordingly. So this is what can help us. Understanding this knowledge can become realized knowledge once we put it into practice. You see, knowledge plus application equals to wisdom. We become wise when we put this knowledge into practice. There's a very famous verse which says, Akama sarva kamova moksha kama udaradihi tivrena bhakti yogena yajate purusham param. What does it mean? It's from the Srimad Bhagavatam. You see those books at the back. From Srimad Bhagavatam in 2nd Canto, chapter 3, it says, a person who has broader intelligence, whether he be full of material desires, without any material desire, or desiring liberation, must by all means worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It doesn't matter what our desires are. But here Bhagavatam says we must worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, the very next verse, number 12, Krishna talks about the difference between God and demigods. There's a misconception. People think that all are gods. No. If you look up the dictionary, the meaning of God is singular, the supreme being. It doesn't say the supreme beings. It's not more than one. If it is more than one, then that is not God. God is somebody who has no one equal to him and no one above him. That is God. So, how do we know who is God? I may tell you, all of you who are there on Zoom and Facebook, I am God. Will you believe that? I'm God. Tell me, will you believe I'm God? Good, Christina. She's saying no. Even though she's my friend, she's saying no. And that is correct. I am not God. God has certain qualifications. Aishwarasya samagrasya virasya yashashriya. You see, there are 6 opulences that the Supreme Lord has in unlimited quantity, unlimited. He's the most beautiful, most wealthy, most knowledgeable, most powerful, most famous, and most strong. He is God. In the scriptures, which are word of authority, it's there in the scriptures, the very first created being Lord Brahma. He says, Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachidananda Vigraha Anadir Adir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. He's saying Ishvara Parama means Param Ishvara. Even there is Ishvara, those are demigods. Parama Ishvara is he's above the demigods. He's Parameshvara. He's above the demigods. That is Krishna. And what kind of form does he have? Sat, Chit, Anand. His form is eternal, full of knowledge and full of bliss. Because he has a transcendental body. He is a personality. You see? So the misconception is that God, Krishna, and the demigods, they are all the same. No. Demigods, they are different forms, they are different parts. They are not different forms of God, but they are different parts of God. Just like this body has so many parts, right? So also the Supreme Lord has different parts, and these demigods are those parts, and they are actually delegated with some powers. Like Lakshmi Devi, she is delegated to give wealth, right? So just like Lord Ganesh, he is, for auspiciousness. Lord Shiva is there to give a nice husband or a nice wife, whatever it may be. They are all delegated with powers. They are parts. They are there to manage the material world. Just like in the company, there is a CEO. He's the owner of the company. But then he has different managers in the company. There's a finance manager, a marketing manager, HR manager, right? All different managers. They are not the owners of the company. They're just managing. They have been given certain powers to run that department. Similarly, the demigods, they are there to manage the material world. They are not equal to Krishna. Very, very important. In fact, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna himself declares, now we have these references from different scriptures like Brahma Samhita, Srimad Bhagavatam. You see, so here Krishna himself is giving this knowledge in chapter number 5. Bhoktaram Yagna Tapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwara. He's a Maha Ishvara of Sarvaloka, of all the planets, of all the demigods. He is the Param Ishvara. He's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then why is it that people worship demigods? One thing is it's lack of knowledge. Second thing is that the demigod worship brings quick results, quick benefits. I worship this demigod and I get the desire fulfilled from this demigod. But these desires that are being fulfilled, they are all temporary and it's all material. You see, so it's very important to understand the difference between God and demigods. Say, for instance, the President of the United States walks into my home, which is not going to happen, just hypothetically. If he walks into my home with his cabinet ministers, will I give them all the same treatment? No, I will, show that discrimination. Okay, this is the president and these are the cabinet ministers. They are not on the same level. Their position is not on the same level. There is a difference. You see? So it's important to understand that there is a supreme personality of Godhead, that is Krishna, according to the scriptures, and then there are demigods, and that is the difference. So unfortunately, there is a lot of misconception, amongst people who, due to lack of knowledge, do not understand the difference between God and demigods. Now, in verse number 13, Krishna tells Arjuna, Chatur Varnyam Maya Shishtam Guna Karma Vibhagasaha. You see, that he has created this Varnashrama system. Varnas means there are four Varnas: Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. Ashramas, there are four ashramas: Brahmachari, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, Sannyas. What is Brahmachari? Before marriage. Grihastha is a married person. Vanaprastha is retired life, and Sannyas is renounced life. So Krishna has created this for a good running of this system of running our lives. This helps us. For instance, if I am unmarried, I need to behave like that. I cannot behave like a married person. Does that make sense? If I am renounced, I cannot behave like a married person, because these are different stages of life and they have different responsibilities and different way of life. So Krishna says, I have given these Chaturvarnyam. He creates, they all come from him. Just like the state laws cannot be manufactured by me. I cannot, because I'm not the state. I don't have the authority. Similarly, the laws of the Supreme Lord are created by him alone. We cannot create these laws and say, according to me, religion means this or that. No. So Krishna says, I have created these four divisions, and he has also created the modes of material nature: guna, karma. Karma means work and guna means modes. So based on the modes that we are in, we perform our activities accordingly. But the Bhagavad Gita gives us knowledge how we can transcend these three modes of material nature and go to the transcendental level. And how? By systematically following the Bhagavad Gita. Simple as that. Now, the last verse of today, 14, that we will be taking, Krishna says that even though I create everything, even though I give everything, but there is no work that affects me. Just like there is a king, right? In the kingdom, there is a king, and that king is, gives out the laws. He said, okay, these are the laws of my land. But is the king subject to those laws? No. King is not subject to the laws. Just like in the prison house, there are prisoners, and then there is a controller of that prisoner. I forget the name. What is he called? In the prison house, right? He's the one who kind of oversees, all the prisoners. Is he?
Jailer.
Huh?
Jailer, Mataji.
Jailer, yes. Like you call the jailer. Who is in charge? Is he the one who has to face what the prisoners are facing? No. Whatever punishments that the prisoners get, the jailer doesn't get. He's just in charge, right? So Krishna is not subject to any laws, and he doesn't get affected by any activities in the material world. He stays aloof. He does not get entangled, but we get entangled in this material world. So what is the solution? Solution is to disentangle ourselves, right? We learned this in chapter 3. Yagnarthat karmano nyatra lokoyam karma bandhana. Tad artham karma kanteya mukta sangha samachara. Mukta. If we want liberation, we want mukti, we want to come out of this cycle of birth and death, if we want to come out of this, going up and down in the modes of material nature, if we want that, if we want to get liberated, then we need to engage ourselves in bhakti yoga. If we keep engaging our senses in only material activities, then we will get more and more entangled. You see, Krishna, he has created everything and everybody. He's even created the demigods, he's created the human beings, the animals. He's created them all. And we are subject to reactions to all our actions. And that is why chapter 3 and 5, they talk about karma yoga, how we need to perform our activities in such a way so that we don't get entangled. You see, animals, they are not subject to reactions. They don't face karma. If a tiger kills a deer or whatever, it doesn't get any karma. They're just going through the evolutionary cycle. That's it. They don't. But we have to face reactions to our actions. You see, Krishna, he is giving us the facilities. He has given us the rules and regulations in the Bhagavad Gita. He is not responsible for our actions. He's given us knowledge so that we can, stop this cycle of action and reaction. You see, he's given us the process by which we can come out of this entanglement, by which we can lead a karma-free life. We learned this in chapter 3. Again, we will learn about it in chapter 5. Right now, we're in chapter 4, which is transcendental knowledge, Divya Gyan. And this transcendental knowledge starts with Krishna giving us the history of the Bhagavad Gita. How old is the Bhagavad Gita? We learned that in verse 1 and 2 of this chapter. That is 120 million years old, this knowledge. And because this knowledge was lost over passage of time, Krishna re-spoke the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna 5,000 years ago in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, a place of religion, to annihilate all the irreligious people and to re-establish religion. Now, what is religion? Religion means laws of God. We learned today from different references who is God. Krishna is the Supreme Lord. And to make this process very simple for us, he came 540 years ago as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That's Krishna himself. And he gave us a very simple method that just like it says, Krite yadhyayato Vishnum Tretayam yajato make. In Satya Yuga, the process for self-realization was meditation for thousands of years, at least 30,000 years. Then one could become self-realized. Then Treta Yuga process was fire sacrifice. Fire sacrifice is performed even nowadays in Kali Yuga, but not the way it is supposed to be performed. And it's supposed to be performed for hundreds and hundreds of years. We don't have that much time, right? Average age is 100 years. Some don't even reach up to the age of 100. So how to perform that fire sacrifice is given in the Srimad Bhagavatam. The Brahmanas in those days in Treta Yuga, they were able to start the fire of the yagna just by chanting the mantras, not with a lighter or a matchstick. No, just by chanting mantras, they could light the fire of the sacrifice. Dwapar Yuga, elaborate deity worship. Kalau tad hari kirtanat. Tad means we get the same benefit Same benefit that we got in Satyuga, Trita Yuga, Dwapar Yuga. How? Hari Kirtana, just by chanting the holy names of Lord Krishna. Hari is Lord Krishna. Simple method. All we have to do is just chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And we can become self realized and become qualified to go back to the spiritual world. So we have covered 4 verses today. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. 5 verses today we have covered. And we will continue, of course, with verse number 15 in the next class, which is next Sunday. So I'm going to end now. If anyone has any questions or comments, you're welcome to ask.
Gita, Hare Krishna. I would like if you can send the list of the food we must not eat, because I'm used to it. For example, garlic and